Eleanor Whitmore was on her knees in the frozen mud when Samuel Carter first truly saw her. January of 1881 had locked Willow Creek, Wyoming territory, under a cold that made every ordinary problem more expensive. Firewood disappeared too quickly. Flour had to be measured. Horses grew white around the nostrils before sunrise. Eleanor had 1 coin left in her pocket, and her 12-year-old daughter, Nora, needed it more than she did. "Keep it," Eleanor whispered, closing Nora's fingers around the coin. "And don't argue with me." Nora's dark, careful eyes lifted to hers. She had inherited that look from her father, the look of a child who had learned too young that adults sometimes lied about being all right. Eleanor smiled until her daughter turned away. Only then did she let the smile fall. A shadow crossed the mud. She expected pity. She had learned what pity looked like from below. Instead, a man's voice said, "Mrs. Whitmore?" She looked up. He was the largest man she had ever seen. Samuel Carter stood broad enough to make the winter street seem narrow, a weather-darkened coat stretched across heavy shoulders, a wide-brimmed hat in one hand. He had the face of a man shaped by mountain wind rather than mirrors, rough beard, hard lines around the eyes, old scars across his hands, nothing polished about him. Yet his expression was careful, not soft. Careful. Eleanor had spent 15 years studying pain in other people's faces. She knew the difference. Samuel Carter was carrying grief. So was she. Willow Creek had never made survival easy. Eleanor supported Nora and 9-year-old Thomas from a 2-room building on the eastern edge of town, where one room served as home and the other as the nearest thing Willow Creek possessed to a dependable healing room. Her mother had taught her plants, fever, infection, childbirth, splinting, and the 100 small judgments that meant the difference between discomfort and death, when the nearest trained physician might be hours away. Eleanor treated people who could pay and people who could not. Sometimes payment was flour, sometimes eggs, sometimes nothing. Her husband, William, had died of fever 5 years earlier. 11 days had taken a good man, left 2 frightened children, a debt on the house, and a future Eleanor had rebuilt one cold morning at a time. She was 36 now. Willow Creek had quietly decided that was old enough for a widow to stop expecting life to choose her again. Too settled, too tired-looking, too large for the town's narrow idea of feminine beauty. Useful when someone's child was sick, certainly. Respectable, dependable. But no longer a woman men looked at and imagined a future beside. Eleanor had learned to live with that judgment. She had not learned to believe it. Samuel put his hat back on that first morning and continued down the street without approaching her. Eleanor thought nothing more about him until Martha Henley arrived at the healing room the following afternoon with a son's injured wrist and enough gossip to warm 3 houses. "The giant who rode in yesterday was asking about you." Eleanor kept wrapping the boy's wrist. "People ask for the healer, not the healer. You, Eleanor Whitmore, and whether you were spoken for." Her hands paused. "Only once. If he needs something," Eleanor said, "he knows where to find me." Samuel found her the next morning splitting wood. He removed his hat before he spoke. "My name is Samuel Carter. I've heard. That doesn't surprise me. Nothing stays private in Willow Creek except what ought to be known." Something almost amused moved behind his eyes. Then it disappeared. "I'd like to speak with you about my son," he said, "your children, and a house on a mountain that hasn't felt like a home in 4 years." That earned him her full attention. Inside, with coffee between them, Samuel told her about Anna. His wife had died 4 years earlier. Their son, Caleb, had been 6. Samuel had kept the ranch alive because grief did not excuse a man from feeding his child or tending livestock. He knew how to fell timber, repair roofs, break trail through winter snow, deliver a calf in freezing rain, mend tack, set a bone, and keep men and animals alive in country that punished mistakes. What he did not know was how to fill the silence Anna had left. "My boy needs people," he said. "He needs a table with more than 2 chairs being used. He needs voices in the house besides mine." Eleanor set down her cup. What exactly are you asking? His large hands tightened around his hat. I have land, a good house, cattle, horses, milk cows, a barn that still needs work, more work than I can finish before spring if winter keeps behaving badly. That isn't an answer. No. Samuel drew one slow breath. I can build a house, Mrs. Whitmore. I know how to do that. What I can't seem to build is a family. His gaze held hers. I'm asking whether you'd consider building one with me. The wind scraped dry branches against the wall. Eleanor stared at him. You don't know me. I know more than you think. He told her about seeing her in the street with Nora. The coin. Her attempt to hide the fact that it was her last. He had also watched her accept flour from a family for medicine, worth far more, then behave as though they had paid generously. He had seen her help an old man cross an icy street without making him feel helpless. You watched me? I happened to be there. And from that you decided I should move into your house? No, his answer came immediately. From that, I decided you were worth knowing. That unsettled her more. She leaned back. You should understand something, Mr. Carter. This town considers me past choosing. Samuel's brow tightened. Past what? Choosing. A wife. Too old, too large, too used to having opinions. I'm useful. That isn't the same thing. I've had women make their interest clear. Then choose one. I'm here. There was no vanity in it. That was almost worse. Samuel leaned forward slightly. I'm not looking for the prettiest woman in a church pew. I'm looking for the woman who can have one coin left and still make her child believe everything is under control. His voice lowered. That's the woman I came to find. Every defense Eleanor had built in 5 winters pressed inward at once. She stood because she needed movement. I cannot answer you today. I didn't expect you to. I may never give you the answer you want. I understand. I have children. I don't gamble with them. I would think less of you if you did. She turned. Samuel was already putting on his coat. No pressure, no wounded pride, no demand for gratitude. At the door he stopped. One thing, Eleanor. It was the first time he used her name. I know what this town has told you about yourself. Her spine went rigid. None of it changes what I saw. Then he left. Nora appeared in the doorway behind Eleanor. Who was he? Samuel Carter. What did he want? Eleanor looked at her daughter and discovered that poverty frightened her less than possibility. I think he wants to know us. Nora considered that. Do you want to know him? Eleanor looked toward the road where the sound of Samuel's horse was fading. That, she said, is what scares me. 3 days later, Samuel returned with Caleb. The 10-year-old boy carried himself like a door barred from the inside. He had Samuel's dark coloring, Samuel's quietness, Samuel's habit of observing before speaking, but none of his father's settled strength. Caleb's silence was defensive. Eleanor knew it because Nora had once worn the same kind. Thomas destroyed it in less than a minute. You're the biggest 10-year-old I ever saw, he announced. Caleb blinked. I'm 9. You want to see where I found a snake last summer? Another blink. Is the snake there? No. Then what are we seeing? The place it was. Caleb looked at Samuel. Samuel shrugged. Caleb followed Thomas around the house. Minutes later, Eleanor heard a sound she had not expected. Caleb laughing. Samuel stood very still beside her. He hasn't done much of that, he said. Laughing? Wanting to. That was the first crack in Eleanor's refusal. The second came during Saturday supper. Samuel folded his enormous frame into furniture too small for him. He did not dominate conversation. He listened. Caleb sat beside Thomas and slowly forgot to guard his face. Nora observed Samuel with clinical thoroughness. Afterward, Samuel began clearing plates without being asked. Eleanor watched him. You understand that I won't become somebody's grateful housekeeper because he owns more land than I do. Samuel set a plate beside the basin. Yes. I have work here. Yes. My children have a life here. Yes. and I have spent 5 years teaching myself not to want what I cannot afford to lose." That stopped him. Eleanor forced herself to continue. "I survived, William. I rebuilt everything. If I trust you, Samuel, and this goes wrong, I don't know whether I have another rebuilding left." He studied her face. "I am not asking you to surrender what you built. Moving to your ranch would change everything. I'm asking you to add something, not erase something." He stepped no closer. "I have waited 4 years because loneliness was easier than choosing wrong." His voice was quiet. "You're worth being patient for." She hated how deeply that sentence landed. "Come back next Saturday," she said. Samuel nodded. Then he came the Saturday after that. And the next. Winter began loosening its grip 1 degree at a time, and Samuel became part of the architecture of Eleanor's weeks. He repaired a hinge without announcing it, brought firewood, and claimed he had extra, sat with Thomas over rope knots, let Nora challenge him without becoming defensive. Thomas adored him with the unembarrassed loyalty of a boy who had grown up without a father in the room. Nora tested him. Samuel understood. One evening she returned from school with humiliation locked behind a blank expression. A mistake on her slate had been held before the class and laughed at. Samuel did not ask her to talk. He sat nearby. "You know," he said, "I built half the east barn wall wrong once." Nora looked up despite herself. "Wrong how?" "Read my measurements badly." "What happened?" "Tore every board down." Her mouth twitched. "Every board?" "Every miserable one. People saw?" "Unfortunately. They laughed?" "Some showed admirable enthusiasm." Nora nearly smiled. "What did you do?" "Built it again." Samuel nodded toward her slate. "The mistake wasn't the important part. What I built after it was." Across the room, Eleanor felt something inside her shift. Later, she asked Nora about Samuel. Her daughter stared into the stove. "He isn't, Papa." "No. That's not a bad thing." Then Nora went to bed. By late February, Eleanor realized Samuel was not trying to replace William. He had never competed with a dead man. That mattered. When Samuel arrived one Saturday with a wagon load of seasoned lumber, however, she nearly sent him home. "What is this?" "Your back step." "My back step?" "Third board is rotten. I know where to put my foot. That doesn't improve the board. You didn't need to buy lumber." "I wanted to." He stopped. "If you don't want me touching it, I won't." The choice was hers. Eleanor looked at the broken step she had learned to avoid so completely that she barely saw it anymore. "Fix it." Samuel rebuilt all 3 steps. Thomas handed nails. Caleb watched Thomas working beside his father with an expression Eleanor understood before the boy did. Jealousy tangled with longing, followed slowly by relief when Samuel drew him into the work as naturally as Thomas. No one was replacing anyone. The circle was simply getting larger. In March, Eleanor finally agreed to visit the Carter Ranch. The wagon climbed east toward Black Ridge Pass, through a country still scarred with winter. Snow lingered in timber shadows. Meltwater ran beneath crusted ice. Horses planted their hooves carefully where the road narrowed above the valley. Samuel drove without wasting words. When the ranch came over the last rise, Eleanor forgot to speak. It was not grand. It was better. A broad timber house stood on the rise, built solid against Wyoming weather. Smoke climbed from the chimney. Fences followed the slope. The barn bore patches from years of storms. Beside the south wall lay the rectangular bones of a kitchen garden, frozen and empty. Eleanor could see Anna there without ever having met her. Samuel had loved his wife. He still did, in the honest way the dead remained part of a decent person, rather than being erased to make room for someone living. "It needs work," Samuel said. Eleanor looked at the house. "Beautiful things often do." He glanced at her. "I was afraid you wouldn't like it." "Why?" "Because then I'd have a real answer." Something in that vulnerability disarmed her. Nora entered first. Thomas vanished toward the barn with Caleb close behind, already shouting about horses. Eleanor found her daughter in the kitchen, palm resting on the large work table. "It's a good kitchen," Nora said. "Yes. 2 people could work here." "Yes." Nora turned. "You've been carrying everything alone for a long time." Eleanor's throat tightened. "That made you strong," Nora continued. "But strong isn't the same as good. Strong just means you survived." "Nora, it doesn't mean you should have had to." Then her 12-year-old daughter walked away, leaving Eleanor alone with a truth adults had been too polite to say. On the journey back, Thomas fell asleep against Caleb. Caleb did not move him. 3 days later, a stranger entered Eleanor's healing room. He was dressed too well for farm work and wore courtesy like a knife kept polished. "Mrs. Whitmore, Edward Graves. I'm with a patient. This will only..." "Outside." He stared at her. Eleanor pointed toward the door. Graves waited. When her patient was gone, he returned and introduced himself properly as an attorney representing Richard Blackwood. Blackwood wanted Samuel Carter's land, mineral possibilities, water access, elevation, development. Samuel had refused to sell. Graves smiled. "My client worries you may misunderstand Mr. Carter's attention." Eleanor's face remained still. "Explain. A widower with a boy needs a caretaker. A ranch needs a woman. His lumber, his visits, his interest, these may simply be investments in an arrangement convenient to him." Eleanor understood immediately. "If I stopped seeing Samuel, your client would find his land negotiations easier." "I'm merely offering perspective." She stood. "Get out." "Mrs. Whitmore, tell Mr. Blackwood I am not a piece of property he can move to reach another piece of property." The smile left Graves. "And tell him," Eleanor continued, "that if he wants Samuel Carter's land, he should try purchasing it legally instead of walking into my room and treating me like a foolish woman who cannot recognize when she is being manipulated." Graves left with a warning half formed on his tongue. Eleanor's hands shook after the door closed. Not from doubt, from fury. She thought about Samuel fixing her steps only after asking permission. She thought about his patience with Nora, Caleb asleep at their table, Thomas's face when Samuel rode into the yard. Then Eleanor closed the healing room and went to the telegraph office. If Blackwood had tried this before, records would tell her. 2 days later, Cheyenne answered. 4 previous acquisitions. 3 surrounded by irregularities, contested ownership, questionable notices, transferred claims, signatures that later became difficult to verify. No prosecution. A pattern. When Samuel next came down for supplies, Eleanor showed him. He read every line. "Graves came into your room?" "Yes." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Whatever he told you, I know what he was doing. Eleanor, I have watched you for months." She held his gaze. "I have watched you with my children, with yours, at my table, at work, when you knew I was watching and when you did not." She tapped the papers. "You have not deceived me." Samuel's face changed. Not pride. Something more vulnerable. Then Eleanor told him what she had found about Blackwood. "I want to help." "Why?" "Because Graves tried to make me doubt my own judgment." That was not the whole reason. Samuel knew it. He did not force her to name the rest. Blackwood's pressure increased. 3 men appeared outside Eleanor's healing room after dark. Graves stood among them. Eleanor did not confront them alone. She went out the back and found Sheriff Daniel Holt, whose daughter she had once treated through a dangerous winter illness. Daniel questioned the men. He could not arrest them for standing on a street, but he made certain they knew they had been identified. "Blackwood's nervous," he told Eleanor the next morning. That interested her. A man did not send watchers because his position was secure. So she wrote to Cheyenne again. This time she asked for everything connected to Samuel Carter's homestead. The answer arrived 4 days later. His original filing from 7 years earlier was clean. But attached to it was another document. A contest filed 8 months ago by Meridian Holdings, alleging Samuel's original survey boundaries were invalid. Legal representative, Edward Graves. Meridian's single principal, Richard Blackwood. Blackwood was not preparing to attack. He had already begun. Eleanor rode for the ranch immediately. March thaw had turned parts of the mountain road to mud, while shaded switchbacks remained hard with ice. She kept her mare controlled and reached Samuel near the north fence before afternoon. He knew from her face that something was wrong. She handed him the telegram. 8 months, he said after reading it. You never received notice? No. Then he may have interfered with that too. Samuel looked toward the ranch. He offered to buy in December. And when you refused, he already had the contest waiting. What do we do? That question told Eleanor more about Samuel than any declaration could have. He did not pretend knowledge he did not possess, merely because she was a woman. She answered, You bring every original document you own to Daniel tomorrow. We request certified copies directly from Cheyenne. Then, we locate your survey witnesses. And after that, we beat him. Samuel stared at her. For 7 years he had solved problems himself. Now someone had said we. Inside, he opened a wooden box containing his homestead records. Anna had insisted they preserve everything properly. A man who keeps bad papers, she had once told him, builds on sand. The records were meticulous. 2 witnesses had signed the survey. Jim Perry, now believed to be in Laramie. Frank Alderman, whereabouts unknown. 1 living witness may be enough, Eleanor said. Caleb had been listening from the doorway. Is someone taking our ranch? Trying, Samuel said. Caleb swallowed. What can I do? Samuel could have lied to protect him. Instead, he gave him something useful. Water Mrs. Whitmore's horse. Check her tack before she rides back. Caleb nodded and went. Eleanor watched him. He'll be a good man. Samuel looked toward the door. I'm trying. You're doing more than trying. The words struck him visibly. On returning home, Eleanor told Nora the truth. Someone was attempting to steal the Carter Ranch through fraudulent filings. Nora listened. Then she asked, Are you going to marry him? Eleanor nearly laughed from shock. I don't know. But you aren't saying no anymore. Eleanor looked at her daughter. No. Nora returned to her schoolwork. Good. The next morning, Eleanor and Samuel laid their evidence before Daniel Holt. Daniel already knew Blackwood's name. He had seen similar contests before. Landowners exhausted by delays eventually sold. Records that had once been clean somehow developed problems before hearings. He has someone inside the filing system, Eleanor said. I've thought so. Can you prove it? No. Then we make him prove it for us. Daniel stared at her. You're going to bait him. I'm going to make the truth impossible to hide. What Blackwood does in response is his choice. When Eleanor and Samuel left the sheriff's office, Samuel stopped her in the street. You didn't need me in there. It's your land. You drove the whole thing. Does that trouble you? No. His answer was immediate. I'm just not used to somebody knowing what to do before I do. Eleanor studied him. I spent 5 years learning how to solve every problem alone. That does not mean I enjoy solving them alone. Samuel's face softened. No, he said. Neither do I. Then Graves appeared. Eleanor told him plainly that she had seen the contest, traced Meridian Holdings, reviewed Samuel's original filing, contacted Cheyenne, and informed the sheriff. And, she added, if anyone interferes with the county records, several people now know exactly what those records are supposed to contain. For the first time, Graves looked frightened. After he left, Samuel said, You put a target on yourself. I know. Blackwood will change tactics. That's what I want. You're not afraid? I'm afraid of what he can do. She looked at Samuel. But I'm more afraid of what happens to your family if we let him. Your family. They both heard it. Samuel's eyes held hers. Eleanor. Not yet. She put one hand against his chest. Not affection exactly. Not refusal either. When this is finished, we will talk about everything else. He covered her hand for one brief second. All right. The next important discovery did not come from Eleanor. It came from Nora. While sorting old supply records, she found a receipt from the summer of 1879. Frank Alderman had passed through Willow Creek. Destination, Rock Springs. Eleanor stared at the paper. You found him. I found where he intended to be 2 years ago. That is considerably better than nowhere. Nora allowed herself a small smile. Eleanor wrote to Rock Springs that night. Before an answer came, Blackwood made his mistake. Someone broke into the county clerk's office and removed pages from Samuel Carter's land file. The missing page contained the original boundary coordinates. Daniel brought the news to Eleanor's house during Saturday supper. Caleb went white. Samuel's hands closed around the edge of the table. Eleanor stood. They failed. Daniel frowned. How? Samuel has his original copy. I requested a certified duplicate from Cheyenne 12 days ago. Understanding spread across Daniel's face. They don't know you have it. No. Eleanor looked at Samuel. Blackwood just told us what his argument was going to be. He intended to remove the county coordinates and claim they were never properly recorded. Samuel stared at her. You expected this. I expected interference. Daniel gave a low breath. You set a trap. I preserved the truth. Blackwood decided what to do with it. The break-in transformed a land dispute into something larger. Government records had been stolen. Federal authorities could now become involved. That night, after the children were asleep, Eleanor and Samuel remained at the table. When this is over, she said, I want to talk about what comes after. He went still. For everyone? Yes. Samuel's expression opened. I'll hold you to that. I expect you to. I expect you to. At Daniel's office the next morning, they assembled the chain carefully. Samuel's clean original, Eleanor's certified copy obtained before the break-in, the corrupted county file, the Meridian contest, Graves, Blackwood, and the previous suspicious acquisitions. Daniel had already contacted the federal marshal's office in Cheyenne. Then Eleanor added Nora's receipt. If Alderman is alive, Daniel said, and confirms his signature, we have a witness untouched by any local records. Samuel looked at the documents. Our land, he said quietly. No one corrected him. Later, Caroline Briggs came to Eleanor with a warning. A stranger in the saloon had been asking about Eleanor, her children, her healing room, whether she possessed legal standing in Carter's case. Tom Briggs, who had once treated Samuel's arrival as entertainment, had lied for her. He had told the stranger Eleanor was only a local healer with no involvement. Be careful, Caroline said. This man looked like somebody paid him to do things decent men don't. I will. Caroline hesitated. Then she studied Eleanor's face. You've changed. How? You look lit up. Eleanor had no answer. Caroline did. Samuel's a good man. Yes. Don't let Blackwood take that from you. The message from Rock Springs arrived the next morning. Frank Alderman was alive, 62, working at a livery, former notary, and he had kept his own records. A third independent copy of Samuel's survey signing. Eleanor had to sit down outside the telegraph office. Blackwood had expected an isolated rancher and a widow he could frighten. Instead, he had Samuel's original documents, a certified territorial copy obtained before the break-in, and a living witness with his own notarial record. Eleanor found Samuel loading grain. Alderman is alive. Samuel lowered the sack. He kept records. He went absolutely still. His own? Yes. It's over. We still have to finish it. But he can't take the land. No. Samuel stepped forward. Then the giant rancher, who trusted almost nothing he had not built with his own hands, wrapped his arms around Eleanor in the middle of Willow Creek. It was not possession. It was relief. Eleanor felt the strength of him trembling once beneath his coat. She held him back. 5 years of carrying her own world had taught her how heavy a person could become without anyone seeing it. Samuel had been carrying one too. For one moment, neither carried alone. Blackwood refused to surrender. Graves filed for an emergency injunction on the Carter property. At Daniel's office, Eleanor read it across the table from him. This relies on the disputed survey. Yes, the survey that exists in 3 independent copies. Graves's eyes tightened. He has a living notary witness, Eleanor continued, and the federal marshal's office was notified of the records break-in before you filed this injunction. She pushed the paper toward him. So understand what you are doing. Any attempt to use altered or stolen records now becomes evidence in an active federal inquiry. Graves looked from Daniel to Samuel. Samuel said nothing. He no longer needed to threaten anybody. Eleanor leaned forward. I don't know what Richard Blackwood is paying you. Decide whether it is enough. 2 days later, Graves withdrew the injunction. 11 days after that, Federal Marshal Cole Whitfield arrived. He spent 3 hours examining everything. His questions were exact. Eleanor answered every one. Finally, Whitfield leaned back. How did you know to request the certified record before the break-in? I studied Blackwood's previous acquisitions. You predicted he would remove government records? I predicted that a man willing to intimidate me and conceal a contest filing might interfere with paperwork. I made sure one office could not destroy the truth. Whitfield was silent. Then he told them the federal marshal's office had been watching Blackwood for 2 years. They understood his methods. What they lacked was a documented pattern connecting the cases. Eleanor had found it. The room changed. Samuel's land was no longer the whole investigation. Blackwood's operation was now exposed. Whitfield asked permission to use Eleanor's records in a broader federal case. She gave it. After the marshal left, Eleanor and Samuel remained alone in Daniel Holt's office. Samuel looked at her. I came to Willow Creek looking for a woman strong enough to help me build something. Eleanor started to answer. I'm not finished. That stopped her. I thought I had something to offer you. A ranch, security, a home for your children, people at the table for my boy. He shook his head. Then I met you. His voice roughened. You already built something. You rebuilt a life with your bare hands after William died. You raised 2 children. You kept half that town alive when they couldn't pay you. And then when someone came for my land, you stood beside me and fought with a weapon I didn't even know how to use. Paper? Your mind. Despite herself, she smiled. Samuel did not. He was too serious. I thought if a woman like you ever let me stand beside her, not ahead of her, not behind her, I'd be the luckiest man in Wyoming. Her smile vanished. Samuel, the thing I asked you for in January was an arrangement. He looked directly into her eyes. That isn't what I want anymore. What do you want? You. No hesitation. No flourish. I love you, Eleanor. 3 plain words. They frightened her more than Blackwood. Because Blackwood could steal land. Samuel could break the part of her she had kept protected for 5 years. Eleanor's hands pressed against her knees. I've known. Samuel waited. I have been afraid to say it because if I name something, it becomes real. Yes, and real things can be lost. Yes. He did not lie to comfort her. He did not promise death would never come, loss would never return, or children would never suffer again. That honesty was why she could finally say it. I love you too. Samuel closed his eyes for one brief moment. Eleanor continued. I'm still afraid. So am I. But I am more afraid of what my life becomes if I keep refusing good things because I once lost one. Samuel reached across the table. Eleanor put her hand in his. Real things can be lost, he said. Yes. They can also be kept. Her fingers closed around his. Yes. 3 days later, terror found them anyway. Martha Henley's youngest boy arrived breathless at Eleanor's healing room. Mrs. Whitmore, Sheriff Holt says come quick. Her body understood danger before her mind did. Samuel? The boy swallowed. Somebody jumped him on the mountain road. For exactly 1 second, Eleanor could not move. Then everything in her became purpose. Samuel was at Doc Riley's. He was sitting upright when she entered, which loosened something inside her chest. His coat had been removed. Blood had dried from a cut above his eyebrow. One side of his jaw was swelling dark. "I'm all right," he said. "I'll decide that." "Eleanor." Quiet. She examined him. No skull fracture that she could detect. Jaw intact. Ribs tender but not obviously broken. The cut needed closing. "Two men." "Yes." "Recognize them?" "No." Daniel stood in the doorway. "One is in my jail." Eleanor looked up. He talked. "Who paid him?" "A man matching Graves's description." Samuel's eyes hardened. Blackwood had crossed from fraud to violence. Eleanor turned back to Samuel. "Does this change anything?" He knew what she meant. Them. Their future. "No." Samuel studied her. "For you?" She threaded her needle. "No." Then he caught her hand. Only for a moment. Only enough to make sure she understood him. She did. "Blackwood panicked," Eleanor said. "He knows the legal case is collapsing." Daniel nodded. "I've already wired Whitfield." "Good." She cleaned Samuel's wound. "This will hurt. I've had worse." "That isn't what I said." The first stitch made his fingers tighten against the edge of the table. Eleanor worked carefully. Samuel remained still beneath her hands because he trusted them. Outside, Willow Creek was already beginning to talk. Eleanor no longer cared. She had spent years allowing the town's opinions to define the borders of what she thought she was permitted to want. Too old, too large, too difficult, too independent. Too finished with being a woman, and too useful as something else. Now she understood the absurdity of it. The man before her had never asked her to become smaller so he could love her. He had made room. So had she. Blackwood was arrested the following Thursday at the rail station in Laramie, with 3 trunks and a one-way ticket east. Graves was arrested with him. The contest against Samuel's ranch collapsed with the federal case. The land was clear. When Daniel delivered the news, Eleanor did not cheer. She simply stood in her healing room and breathed. Then she went looking for Samuel. She found him, fittingly, at the grain merchant's wagon. He read the answer in her face. "Blackwood? Arrested. Graves? Him too." Samuel stopped moving. "The ranch? Yours." Eleanor smiled. "Ours, if you still meant what you said." Samuel looked away toward the mountains. For several seconds, the largest man in Willow Creek could not speak. When he turned back, his eyes were wet. "Bring the children tomorrow." "To the ranch?" "All day." "All day is specific." "I want one day," he said, "with everybody where they belong and nobody trying to take anything from us." She nodded. All day. The next morning, the mountain road felt different. Nothing about the land had changed. Snow still lingered in high shade. The wagon still jolted over ruts. The same cold runoff crossed the road. But Eleanor was no longer traveling toward a question. Thomas talked, until Caleb began answering him, just to slow the production of new questions. Nora rode beside Eleanor with a calm expression that suggested she had settled this matter months before the adults. At the ranch, the boys went straight for the barn. Nora walked the empty kitchen garden as though already deciding what would grow where. Eleanor entered the house and made coffee. She knew where Samuel kept it. That small fact stopped her. Once she had entered this kitchen as a visitor measuring exits, distances, risks. Now she reached for the pot without thinking. Samuel watched from the doorway. "You look right in here. Don't make it strange. I'm stating a fact." They sat at the table Anna had once used. Samuel wrapped both hands around his cup. "I need to ask you something." "Then ask." "Marry me." Eleanor looked at him. No speech. No bargain. No promise that he would rescue her. She thought of the coin in January. The rotted step. Caleb laughing. Nora testing him. The long mountain road. Graves in her healing room. Records from Cheyenne. A break-in. A former notary in Rock Springs. Samuel sitting still while she stitched his face because he trusted her completely. She thought of the 5 years she had survived by refusing to want. Then she understood that courage was not surviving without desire. Sometimes courage was admitting what you wanted while knowing it could be lost. Yes. Samuel did not move. Yes, Eleanor repeated. The whole of his face changed. Grief remained in it. Anna would always be part of him. So would William be part of Eleanor. But grief no longer owned all the available ground. Samuel reached across the table. Their hands met. From the barn came Thomas's triumphant scream. "Caleb! She likes me! The brown one likes me!" Caleb answered. "Her name is Bess. She likes anybody carrying oats. She likes me specifically." Eleanor looked at Samuel. "That one is mine." Samuel's mouth lifted. "So I've noticed." They told the children that afternoon. Samuel used the same plain language he had used with Eleanor from the beginning. "I asked Mrs. Whitmore to marry me. She said yes." Thomas nearly came out of his chair. Samuel continued before he could explode. "This means the ranch becomes home for everyone here. Not guests. Not temporary. Home." Thomas raised his hand, although no one had requested hands. "Can I call you Pa?" Samuel's breath caught. "If that's what you want." "Yes." Thomas turned to Eleanor. He said yes. I heard him. Caleb remained quiet. Samuel looked at his son. "You aren't losing anything." Caleb stared at his hands. "I know. Do you?" Caleb looked at Eleanor. "She isn't trying to be my mother." "No," Samuel said. Eleanor waited. Caleb had been waiting all his life for adults to force meanings onto him. She would not. Finally, he said, "She's something else." Eleanor nodded. "Yes." He considered her. "Okay." One word. She received it like a gift. Then Nora spoke. "I decided in February." Everyone turned. Samuel blinked. "Decided what?" "That you were worth trusting." The giant rancher became perfectly still. Nora continued in her precise way. "When you told me about building the barn wall wrong, I'd already been watching you. That was when I decided." Samuel regarded her with the solemnity she deserved. "Thank you. I thought you should know. I won't waste it." "I know." Thomas looked around the table. "So we're a family now." Eleanor looked at Samuel, then Caleb, then Nora, then Thomas. "We're a family." Thomas considered this enormous change for approximately 2 seconds. "Can I have more bread?" All 5 of them laughed. The wedding came in May. They married on a Saturday because Saturdays had become theirs. Martha Henley cried and blamed the wind. Daniel Holt stood in the back pretending not to be pleased. Caroline Briggs caught Eleanor before the ceremony. "Lit up," she whispered. Eleanor smiled. There was no one to walk Eleanor down the aisle. Several people had offered. She refused them all. For 5 years, she had walked alone because she had no choice. Now she would walk alone because she did. No one was handing her from one man to another. William had not owned her. Samuel would not own her. She was choosing where to put her own feet. Samuel waited at the front with Caleb beside him. Thomas's collar was straight through an achievement no one expected to survive the hour. Nora stood waiting for her mother. Eleanor walked the length of the little church alone. When she reached Samuel, he looked at her with the expression that had first frightened her in January. He saw her. Not the widow, not the healer, not the woman Willow Creek had decided was beyond choosing. Her. "You walked yourself," he murmured. "I did. I expected nothing less." Their vows were ordinary. The people speaking them made them otherwise. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Thomas cheered loudly enough to startle the minister. Caleb caught his arm and muttered something long-suffering. Nora closed her eyes for a moment. Samuel placed his hands gently against Eleanor's face. He kissed her. She kissed him back. And for Eleanor, the most important thing was not that Willow Creek witnessed it. It was that she no longer needed Willow Creek too. They moved to the ranch in June. Eleanor did not abandon her work. She had told Samuel she would continue healing people before she agreed to marry him. He had never asked otherwise. Still, she was unprepared for what she found beside the main house. A new room. A proper treatment room with a window for daylight, a sturdy table, shelves for supplies, cabinets high enough to keep children from remedies, and a separate entrance so patients did not need to cross the family's living space. Eleanor stood in the doorway. "You built this?" "Yes." "You didn't tell me. I wanted to see your face." She turned. "Worth the trouble?" Samuel looked at her. "Every board." She pressed her palm once against his chest. There were no words adequate to what he had built. Not a room. Recognition. Summer changed the ranch. Thomas and Caleb came to breakfast muddy despite weather that offered no obvious source for so much mud. Nora took command of the garden. Samuel observed her for 2 days, recognized superior authority, and surrendered the entire enterprise without argument. Caleb slowly stopped listening for loss in every quiet room. The house became noisy. Not perfect. Never perfect. The boys had a fight in July that required 90 minutes of patient investigation and produced 2 contradictory accounts, 1 damaged bucket, and an eventual apology from both. Nora received a letter from William's sister that reopened grief she had not known how to name. She spent 3 days speaking almost nothing. Eleanor sat beside her without demanding healing on schedule. Samuel left wildflowers outside Nora's door. He never mentioned them. Neither did Nora. Caleb acquired a dog without permission. Eleanor raised one eyebrow. The dog stayed. Samuel and Eleanor argued too. About repairs. About how much work one human body could reasonably attempt in a day. About Samuel's habit of calling an injury nothing until Eleanor examined it and proved otherwise. About Eleanor's habit of seeing 6 patients without eating. Love did not make life smooth. It made the work worth doing. The hour Eleanor treasured most came before sunrise. She rose early. Samuel followed 10 minutes later. They drank coffee before the children woke, when the mountain was blue with pre-dawn cold and the ranch still belonged to silence. Sometimes they discussed money, sometimes fencing, sometimes patience, sometimes the children, sometimes Anna, sometimes William. Neither marriage disappeared because another had begun. The dead were not rivals. They were part of the road that had carried both of them here. One evening in late August, Caleb came to Eleanor's workroom. He stood in the doorway until she noticed him. "Come in." He sat. At 10, he already had Samuel's way of gathering himself before saying anything important. "When Pa first said he was going to Willow Creek," Caleb began, "I thought he was going to find somebody who wanted to be my new mother." Eleanor waited. "I decided I wouldn't let her." "I know." Caleb looked surprised. "You knew? You weren't subtle." "I thought I was." "You were 10. That almost earned a smile. He looked at his hands. "You never tried. To be your mother?" He nodded. "No." "Why?" "Because you had one." Caleb's eyes lifted. "Anna was your mother. Loving you didn't require me to take her place." He swallowed. "I still don't need another mother." "I know. But..." He searched for the words. "I needed somebody like you." Eleanor put down her pen. Caleb continued. "I didn't know that until you were already here." For a moment, Eleanor could see the 6-year-old he had once been, standing in the wreckage Anna's death left behind, learning to make himself quiet so Samuel would have one less thing to carry. "You trusted me," she said. Caleb shrugged. "I didn't do anything. You trusted me." He looked at her. That was everything. His face tightened. Eleanor reached across the table, but stopped before touching him, leaving the last distance his. Caleb crossed it. Only his hand into hers. Only for a moment. Then he stood. "Pa wants to know if you're coming outside before the light goes. Tell him 2 minutes." Caleb reached the door. "Caleb?" He turned. "You have been one of the great privileges of my life." He blinked. Then he nodded once. Exactly like Samuel. Outside, August light stretched gold across the valley. Willow Creek's windows were beginning to glow below. Eleanor joined Samuel on the porch. Behind them, Thomas was explaining something to Nora with enormous urgency. Nora corrected him with patient precision. Caleb added one dry observation. All three burst out laughing. Samuel reached for Eleanor's hand without looking. She gave it to him. "You all right?" he asked. "Better than all right." They stood together. Eleanor thought of the woman she had been in January, kneeling in frozen mud with her final coin pressed into her daughter's palm. She had thought survival was the highest achievement available to her. Keep the children fed. Keep the fire alive. Keep the healing room open. Keep grief contained. Do not want too much. Do not risk what remains. Do not mistake loneliness for a problem, when loneliness at least cannot abandon you. She had been wrong. Not about surviving. Survival mattered. But survival had never been meant to become the whole of a life. "I spent 5 years telling myself what I had was enough," she said. Samuel waited. That keeping Nora and Thomas warm and fed and loved was enough. That wanting anything beyond that was foolish. She looked over the valley. "I survived. I was proud of surviving. You should be. But I confused being strong enough to carry everything with being meant to carry everything." Samuel's hand tightened gently around hers. Eleanor turned toward him. "You know what you gave me." He shook his head. "Not rescue." "I know. Not charity. I know that too. You showed up." Samuel watched her. "You kept showing up. You stayed when I was suspicious. You gave Nora time. You never asked Caleb to forget Anna. You let Thomas climb all over your life, without pretending it annoyed you less than it did. It annoys me considerably. I know." She smiled. "And when somebody came for the ranch, you let me fight beside you." Samuel was quiet. "You gave me a life where I do not have to become smaller to belong." His expression opened completely. "You gave yourself that. Maybe." Eleanor leaned against him. "But you made room for it." Behind them stood the house Samuel had once believed he could build but could not make alive. Now 4 children filled it. Nora's books rested on the kitchen table. Thomas's boots had been abandoned somewhere they did not belong. Caleb's dog slept beside the stove. Eleanor's medicines filled the workroom Samuel had built without asking her to surrender the work that made her herself. Anna's garden grew again under Nora's hands. William remained in his children's memories. Nothing valuable had required destroying what came before. Samuel Carter had once ridden into Willow Creek, believing he needed a woman to make his ranch a family. He had been only partly right. He had needed Eleanor. But Eleanor had needed something too. Not a rescuer, not a man to carry what she was incapable of carrying, but someone reliable enough that she could finally choose not to carry everything alone. The giant cowboy had offered her a house. She had brought him a family. Then the bargain had become something greater than either of them intended. They had built a home. Samuel lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her knuckles. "Cold?" he asked. "Not yet. Will be soon. Then we'll go inside." He nodded. Neither moved. The last sunlight lay across Black Ridge, and the ranch below it, touching the barn, the fences, the garden, the roof Samuel had built 7 years earlier, with no idea who would one day stand beneath it. Eleanor listened to the voices behind her. Thomas, Nora, Caleb, Samuel beside her. For 5 years she had guarded the door inside herself because anything admitted through it might someday be taken. Now it stood open. Loss remained possible. Winter would return. Children would grow. Bodies would fail. People would make mistakes. No honest love could promise otherwise. But fear of losing a life was no longer reason enough not to live one. Samuel squeezed her hand. "Ready?" Eleanor looked once more across the valley, then toward the light spilling from the open cabin door. "Yes." Together they went inside.